Ancient Greek is not a beginner's language. Beginners, meaning people who have not studied other languages before, will find it more difficult to achieve fluency in Ancient Greek than in many other languages which would be traditionally considered more difficult, such as Chinese, Japanese, Arabic, or Russian. The reason for this is that good resources, methods, and books for learning Ancient Greek are very hard to come by. As you will see from this video, when learning Ancient Greek, you must often pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, and as such, it is very helpful if you have experience in other languages before turning to Ancient Greek. Fluency in a foreign language is a transferable skill. Once you train your brain to fluency in one language, all subsequent languages become much easier. Ancient Greek was actually the first language that I studied seriously, but it was one of the last languages that I was able to read fluently. It was only after learning Latin, Russian, Italian, German, and Modern Greek that I was finally able to begin reading Ancient Greek fluently. So in this video, I will review some of the books available, but I will focus more on techniques and strategies which I believe are best for learning Ancient Greek. I've already made a video about the relationship between Modern Greek and Ancient Greek, but to sum up, they are the same language and much more similar to one another than, for instance, Latin to Italian or Old English to Modern English. If I were to begin my studies of Greek again, I would begin by learning Modern Greek first. Of course, if you have absolutely no motivation to learn Modern Greek, you should not force yourself. Without motivation, you won't make any progress. But doing it this way could save you a lot of time. After 5 or 6 years of diligent study of Ancient Greek using traditional methods, I could still not read Ancient Greek fluently, and I have the impression that I am far from being alone in this. As a matter of fact, I know personally hundreds of people who have studied Ancient Greek, but less than a handful who can read it fluently. If you were to study Modern Greek for 2 hours per day for a year or two using intelligent methods, you could arrive at a very nice level of fluency. If you were to then turn your energies to Ancient Greek, you would be able to transfer much of your knowledge from Modern Greek. After about another year or so of serious study, meaning about 2 hours daily, you would likely be reading Ancient Greek much more fluently than someone like me, who after 5 or 6 years of traditional grammar translation methods could barely read Greek. Thus, you cut your learning time in half and get 2 languages instead of 1. The reason that it is much easier to learn Modern Greek than Ancient Greek is because there are better materials available. You can also easily find a conversation partner on the internet, and you can watch Greek movies and documentaries and shows online and listen to the Greek radio for free, and you can travel to Greece and live the language. There are many different stages of Greek: Homeric, Attic, Byzantine, Demotic. But once you learn one stage well, the amount of time needed to learn how to read any other stage is minimal. So it just makes sense to start with the stage that has the most abundant materials to work with. Moving in reverse chronological order is almost always the best strategy for languages which have multiple stages. If you are a native English speaker, I issue you the following challenge. Pick up an edition of Chaucer written in Middle English. At first, you won't be able to understand much, but it will feel familiar. Spend an hour or so just reading Chaucer each day. No grammar, no dictionary, nothing. Maybe just check a modern English version every so often. After a few weeks, you'll be able to read him without any problem. Then move backwards in time to Beowulf or any other book of Old English texts, and use the same method. No grammar book, no dictionary. Again, it will feel familiar even if at first you can't understand much. After a few weeks of reading for an hour or so each day, you will have no problem understanding the vast majority of Old English. Old English and Modern English are much more different than Ancient Greek and Modern Greek, so you can use this as a test to get a feel for what it is like to open a book of Ancient Greek for someone who speaks Modern Greek. I won't go into detail about the resources available for Modern Greek, but I've found the German Asimil course and the Cortina course very useful. The Asimil course is also available in French and Italian. The Cortina course is out of print and can be purchased cheaply online. There's also some audio for it, but I don't know where to find it. I also know that there's a Teach Yourself, a colloquial, and a living language course, but I can't vouch for them because I haven't used them myself. Also, if you're interested in the Old English, Middle English challenge, these 2 Penguin editions of Chaucer and Beowulf are cheap and get the job done. I'll put links to them in the description. Of all the textbooks available for Ancient Greek, one of the best is the Italian edition of Athenaze, pictured here on the left. This edition takes the main story of the English version of Athenaze, here on the right, and adds a few hundred pages of Greek text to read. It also rearranges the Greek text to resemble Lingua Latina per se illustrata, with new words eventually being glossed with images, synonyms, and paraphrases. If you have a talented teacher who speaks Ancient Greek, this book is amazing. It's not the best for self-study, however, since it is not as intuitive as Lingua Latina per se illustrata. First, if you are a beginner, you definitely need Italian to use the book. Second, the intuitive method of Lingua Latina often works because there are so many Latin words in modern European languages. This makes many words more or less transparent. This is much less the case with Greek. The 2 volumes are somewhat difficult to track down outside of Italy, but if you can get them, I would recommend using them as a graded reader rather than as an introductory textbook. I went through both of these books, and having 300 or 400 pages of simple Greek to read was definitely a help. Over the course of the 2 volumes, there are well over 2,000 words introduced. The English edition of Athenaze has a traditional grammar translation methodology. There is much less Greek to read and nowhere near as many vocabulary words as the Italian edition, but it still has more Greek text than many of the other English options available. Another book to know about is Rouse's Greek Boy. This is a public domain text, but I'll put a link to a recent reprint of good quality in the description. This is again not so much a beginner's textbook, but a graded reader. It has over 100 pages of text to read and a glossary in the back in which many of the words are glossed in Greek. It can be paired with a book called First Greek Course, which gives grammatical explanations, but is still not very useful for beginners. On the right, you'll see the recently published Alexandros, which is an attempt to write a textbook entirely in Greek, much like Lingua Latina for Latin. The text is based on Rouse's Greek Boy, and the format tries to mirror Familia Romana. The book is wonderful if used with a skilled teacher, but would be frustrating for self-learners. The most helpful thing about this book is the grammatical appendix, which is written entirely in Greek and gives you the vocabulary you need to talk about grammar in ancient Greek. The book is published in Spain, so you may have to search a bit to find it. I'll also mention the best traditional grammar translation options available. There are actually quite a lot of these types of books, but they don't actually teach you to read Greek, they just teach you about Greek. On the left, we have Hansen and Quinn Greek, an intensive course. This is actually the book I used when I was first learning Greek. It's massive, thorough, and boring. All of Greek grammar is divided up into only 20 very overwhelming chapters. It only teaches about 400 or 500 words. The sentences in each chapter are often unnatural, contain rather rare forms, and are written to try to trick you. On top of that, they have no literary value or interest. The textbook is less of a teaching method and more of a grammar book with some exercises thrown in. This book is one of the most commonly used in universities in America. If you have the misfortune to be using this book, be sure to supplement your learning with as much extensive reading as possible, perhaps using some of the above-mentioned methods. If you fail to do this, you will likely find yourself in the same position that many learners find themselves in after 3 or 4 years. You'll be able to translate and identify syntax perfectly, but it will take you an hour or more to read a page or 2 of Greek. But I should also say that ultimately, since there's no ideal method or textbook available for learning ancient Greek, it almost doesn't matter what you use. You just need to get a foothold in the language any way you can and start reading as much as possible. You can certainly learn Greek with Hansen and Quinn, but it might be a discouraging and slow process, and you'll need to use a lot of extra materials. Another popular grammar translation option is Learn to Read Greek. This has almost all of the same faults as Hansen and Quinn. It just gives the learner way too much information about Greek and not enough Greek itself, but it is organized into slightly more manageable units and teaches slightly more vocabulary and has more passages to read. After you've somehow clawed your way to an intermediate level in Greek, the next step is to start using readers. An excellent series of books is now being produced by Jeffrey Stedman. His commentaries are modeled on Clive Farr's classic edition of the Aeneid. All of the texts have a facing list of vocabulary and grammatical notes. This means that you can begin reading Greek text even if you have a small vocabulary. The best way to read these books is to first use the vocabulary to help you understand the text, and then continue to reread whatever section you're working on, be it a sentence, a paragraph, or a chapter, and you can read it without needing any vocabulary help at the same speed that you can read your native language. Eventually, after much work, you want to be able to read the entire book without any vocab help, with a speed that approximates your reading speed in your native language. It is important to remember that reading is a mechanical skill that involves a fluid movement of the eye across lines of text on a page and transference of information directly from the page to your brain through the eye. You need to train your eye to read at the speed that you would like to read at. If you always train your eye to pause multiple times per line to look up words and then translate into English in your mind, you will never read fluently because you'll never have the necessary eye coordination. All of Stedman's books are available for free as PDFs on his website, but you can buy paper editions through Amazon for a few bucks. I'll put some links in the description. I talked about bilingual books in my How to Learn Latin video, but I'll mention them again here. Using bilingual books is not cheating. It is in fact one of the most powerful language learning tools you have available. The key is to use them properly. First, you read the translation of whatever section you are working on. Second, you use the translation as a crutch to help you understand the Greek. Third, you reread the Greek, using the translation only when you forget a word or construction. The translation becomes an instant dictionary keyed to your text. Finally, you continue to reread the Greek text until you can read the entire book without looking at the translation at all. The same principle applies here as for the readers. If you want to read at a normal pace, you have to push and train your eye at that pace. After you have gone through this process of mastery through repeated rereadings with a handful of readers and bilingual texts, you will be ready to take down a text and read it comfortably without any help. I also spoke about what it takes to speak an ancient language in my Latin video, but I'll repeat it briefly here. If you want to speak well, you must first have a good passive knowledge of the language, and then you must speak a lot. Good speakers are not more talented, they just have pronounced more sentences. It is harder to find people who speak ancient Greek than Latin, so by definition, it should be harder to speak ancient Greek than Latin. But modern Greek can help you with this. If you learn to speak modern Greek well, you will almost by default speak ancient Greek well, since your brain will already have activated so much of the vocabulary and many of the structures. You just need to make some minor adjustments. I find that if I go a long period without speaking ancient Greek, but spend a lot of time speaking and reading modern Greek, when I return to speaking ancient Greek, I speak much better than I had earlier. Similarly, if I go a long time without speaking modern Greek, but spend a lot of time reading ancient Greek, when I find a Greek to speak with, I notice that my modern Greek has improved without any effort. This is all to say that modern Greek and ancient Greek complement one another, and making progress in one of the two leads to progress in the other.